morning. I'm Frank Strada, Commissioner for Department of Corrections for Tennessee. And today, May 22nd, 2025, by order of the Tennessee Supreme Court, the Department of Correction carried out the death sentence of Oscar Franklin Smith by means of lethal injection at the Riverbend Maximum Security Institution. Inmate Smith was pronounced dead at 10:47 a.m. This concludes my statement. At this time, I'll turn it over to the victim's family for any comments.
If everyone is ready to begin, we will first have the official statement from Commissioner Frank Strada. Mike Roberts and Terry Osborne, brother and sister of Judy Roberts, uncle and aunt of Chad and Jason Burnett, will make a statement. They will not take any questions. Thank you, Commissioner Strada.
Good morning again. I'm Frank Strada, Commissioner for Tennessee Department of Corrections, and today on May 22nd, 2025, by order of the Tennessee Supreme Court, the Department of Correction carried out the death sentence of Oscar Franklin Smith by means of lethal injection at the Riverbend Maximum Security Institution. Inmate Smith was pronounced dead at 10:47 a.m. This concludes my statement. Thank you.
Good morning. On behalf of our family, we want to express our deepest gratitude to the investigators, law enforcement officers, and everyone within the judicial system who worked tirelessly to seek justice for our sister, Judy, and our two nephews, Chad and Jason. Their dedication and commitment during this unimaginable, difficult time has meant more to us than words can say. Oscar Frank Smith was tried and sentenced to the death penalty by the state of Tennessee after a jury's careful deliberation based on the brutality of the three murders that included two children. As a family of the victims, we believe that in the importance of accountability and the role of the judicial system that it plays in maintaining safety and order of our society. The sentence was not ours to determine, but we stand by the legal system that made the decision.
My name's Terry Osborne. I was formerly a Roberts, my sister and my nephews. The pain of losing Judy, Chad, and Jason is something that we will continue to carry. It's not a moment that goes by that we don't miss them. I miss the sound of Judy's voice. I know my brother does as well. On the other end of the phone, we miss the excitement of planning Chad's driving lessons, and we miss the pure joy of hearing Jason's laughter. These are memories and wounds that will never fully heal. Through our heartbreak, we are reminded of the devastating consequences of domestic violence. The tragedy is not only a personal loss, it's part of a much larger issue that affects countless families across our society. Domestic violence destroys lives. We hope that sharing our story helps others recognize the warning signs and dangers involved, especially for the children. For those who may be living in fear or in the grip of abuse, please know that you are not alone. We know it is an incredibly hard thing to do to leave a spouse who is abusing, but pray that this case becomes a call to action, encouraging those in danger to seek help before it's too late. We also pray that more resources and support will be made available to those who need that helping hand.
Finally, we would say that no one should have to live in fear like our sister did, and no family should have to endure a loss like ours.
Okay, the media witnesses will come forward and speak.
Hello, I'm Travis Lawler. I'm with the Associated Press. So I'm just going to tell you what we saw. So it was a little behind the schedule that's laid out in the protocol. At 10:16, we were taken into the witness room, which is just a small cinder block room, about 20 chairs and 4 windows in front of us. And there's the curtains are down, so we couldn't see anything. But we could hear into the next room. We could hear the spiritual advisor praying over Oscar and we could hear some voices, some talking. I couldn't like hear exactly most of the words that were said, but then she started singing, the spiritual advisor started singing I'll Fly Away, and at 10:32 they raised the curtains, and from my perspective where I was, I couldn't see that much because the spiritual advisor was standing next to Oscar and sort of blocking my view, at least, of his face, but he was strapped to a gurney, and he had on like a yellow prison uniform, and there was a sheet over him, and his hands were completely taped down with like what looked like some kind of tan medical tape, like you couldn't even see them, and there was you could see the line that I guess the drugs would come through, sort of coming out through the wall. I'm not sure. I don't know exactly when they started the lethal injection. There was no obvious sign of that to me. At 10:35, his attorney, Smith's attorney, Amy Harwell, actually got one of the prison officials to ask his spiritual advisor to move around to the other side, so then it was the first time I could see his face. And he was still conscious at that point, and but his eyes appeared to be closed, and she was speaking to him, and she seemed to be, I think she sounded like she was saying, explaining to him why she was moving. She just moved to the other side of him, and he turned to her and smiled, and they had some conversation. She said, I'll see you someday, save a seat for me at that banquet table. He was, oh wait, I'm sorry, I skipped a page. Sorry. So he did give a last statement, which was actually before she moved around, which is, I wrote down, it was quite long, so hopefully between all of us, we'll get the whole thing, but he said, somebody needs to tell the governor the justice system doesn't work. He's the last word and the last person to give justice where justice is needed. Too many innocent people are being killed. And then he said I didn't quite get that, something about, if he can't do that, he said he needs to quit being the governor, he needs to walk away, the justice system is broke, he has the last word, something about doing what is right. He mentioned something about ineffective assistance of counsel and said that's what experts for, and the working man doesn't have that knowledge. And then speaking of the governor again, he said he's a damn fool if he doesn't realize there are more men waiting to die on Riverbend. I'm not the first, I'm not going to be the last. And then I think he said, God bless him if he gets his back up to do what he needs to do in the future. So anyway, and then at that point, 10:35, that's when she moved around and they had that conversation. And then, I didn't really see him struggling or anything. He was talking, and then it sort of seemed that he was struggling to talk. And I feel like I heard him say, I didn't kill her, but maybe other people can say whether that's what they heard as well. And then she continued to pray. And then at 10:40, there's this sort of little slot in the back where this gloved hand comes out and puts a rock down, and it's some kind of signal. I'm not exactly sure what it is, but I believe that's the signal that the pentobarbital is stopped and that they're running the saline, or maybe it's the signal that the whole thing's over. He wasn't moving or talking at that point. And then at 10:45, they lowered the curtains. A doctor came in to confirm the death. We didn't see this. We could hear. I heard him asking for a stethoscope, and then they pronounced death at 10:47. So, what, the next person?
Hello, my name is Maline Olen. I'm a reporter with Fox 17 News. I've covered a lot of executions, but this was my first time being a witness to an execution. It was definitely, like she mentioned, a little later. It was supposed to start at 10 a.m., but we didn't get into the room until around 10:16. And same thing that she said, it was a room just really small, a few chairs for the witnesses and a few other people in the back. Couldn't hear much. The window was covered, but you could see kind of like a reflection. You could hear soft speaking of like a woman just saying a few words. I couldn't really make anything out. I heard like, "Oh Lord," and that's like kind of really what I heard for the most part, and that was again at 10:16. 10:24, we had a few people come in and then leave. Kept hearing again few subtle words like "mountains tremble," and then I kind of picked up on the fact that, oh, that could be the spiritual advisor reading some scripture. At 10:32, they did turn the lights off. The speakers came on, and they opened the curtains. They asked him, "Do you want to say any last words?" He said, "Yes, I do." And same thing, it was a really long statement, so I didn't get everything quite down, but for the most part it was, the justice system doesn't warrant, too many of us are killed, he needs to quit. And then he did say, like the governor, our justice system is broken, he has the power to stop this. The working man doesn't have, and I kind of just didn't get much. And then he said, "We have more men waiting to die at Riverbend. I won't be the first, and I won't be the last." And then at 10:35, the Reverend begins speaking to him, that is his spiritual advisor, like saying, "Release you from suffering, Jesus Christ, amen." And then they started having a conversation. She goes, "Save a seat for me," and he said, "I will." That's when, the same time, the spiritual advisor was actually on the right side of Smith. So they asked her again to move to the other side. They had someone going back into that room and have her move. And so that was, again, the first time that we could see Smith's face. Because, again, we were kind of on this side, so definitely a horizontal view of his body. So couldn't see his face until then, and then finally could. And then they were kind of having a conversation, his spiritual advisor and Smith, and that's when he said twice, very faintly, "I didn't kill her, I didn't kill her." Then he, again, that conversation's kind of starting, but then at 10:38, he just stops talking, kind of like struggling to talk. His hands were taped up, he was strapped down, one strap across his body, others on his wrist. At least I could see the right side of his wrist, and I knew that was strapped down. And then again, his fingers were taped, so you could not see his hands. At 10:40, that little hole in the wall opened, and someone placed a rock outside. All of us are trying to figure out kind of what that rock meant. Some people are saying that's when all of the drugs were pushed through, or like when they started saline. We have no idea what that is, but the spiritual advisor starts reading more scripture at 10:41, and then at 10:43 altogether she stops reading scripture, and that's when another man comes in and everything kind of went silent. 10:45, at exactly 10:45 they closed the window. But during the whole thing, I didn't see any sudden movements from Smith. Really, nothing. The spiritual advisor did come into our witness room after, and then they closed the curtains. And then when we were had the curtains closed, it just sounded like that they were making sure that everything went through. Someone on the speaker said there's no pulse, no perspiration, and then said the time of the death is 10:47, and that is when they asked the witnesses to leave. And that is all I have.
Much more, I think our notes are all fairly the same. There were a couple of little details I did want to add. We did not know exactly when the first dose was administered. He was speaking still at 10:35. The Reverend did the Lord's Prayer at 10:41, and then a reading from from the Bible right after that at 10:42. Smith was not moving at all by 10:43, and there was a bluish tint to his face by 10:44. Right before the curtain closed. So.
Hello everyone, my name is Kirsten Fiscus. I'm a reporter with the Tennessean and USA Today Network. Like my colleagues here have said, we were taken back into the witness room at 10:16. It seemed like things were a little delayed. As we came in, the spiritual advisor, we could hear her a little bit. We were all very quiet trying to listen to what she was saying. Obviously, saying prayers and giving him words of encouragement. At one point, I heard her say, "Be strong and the Lord is good." And this was before the blind came up in our room. That happened at 10:32, and so we could finally see Oscar. We were looking at him from his right side, laid out on the gurney. His hands, like everyone has said, were kind of like, looked like they were like ace bandaged, so we couldn't see any movement in his fingers or anything like that. His last words started at 10:32 and lasted for 3 minutes. Like everyone else has said, he was pretty critical of the governor. He said, too many of us are being killed for someone else's deeds. At one point, and then his statement ended at 10:35. His spiritual advisor, as everyone else has said, was on his right side, so we couldn't see his face during those last words, and then she moved to the other side so we could kind of get a full view of him. I noted at 10:38, his eyes had closed, and then at 10:40, the rock was placed in the compartment, signaling something. 10:41, his spiritual advisor said the Lord's Prayer, and then she closed her Bible, bowed her head, and closed her eyes, and leaned against the wall for a moment. At 10:44, I noticed that the skin on his face did look a different color. It looked kind of bluish and kind of purple. And then the blinds closed at 10:45, and we sat there until at 10:47. We overheard someone ask if they could remove some of the straps so they could use their stethoscope. And then at 10:49, there came over the intercom saying that the sentence had been carried out and his time of death was 10:47. And I think I did want to note that he did turn to his spiritual advisor at one point and say, "I didn't kill her, I didn't kill her," but at no time did he make any mention that I could hear of the two boys.
Hello, I'm Rob Walters with Six Rivers Media, and I'll just I concur with everything that's been said so far. Just a couple of other little details that when the curtains were raised, we did see the spiritual advisor, and it looked like that she was touching his shoulder as she prayed over him. Again, as she continued to pray and they had a bit of a conversation, at one point, as everybody else said, she did move to the other side so you could see his face for the first time, his white beard, no glasses, as you see him. The glasses been removed, strapped down, black strap diagonal across his chest. Hands were wrapped up, as other folks have mentioned. I did note the Lord's Prayer at 10:41, as mentioned. Again, spiritual advisor, one point just backed away, just leaned up against the cinder blocks, put her head down. We did see the rock come out at about 10:40, but as the process was going on, I didn't notice any heaving of the chest or any tremors, or it was just like watching somebody go to sleep, from what I could see. So, at any rate, I think everyone else has filled in some of the other blanks. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tori Gessner with News 2 WKRN. My notes are very similar. Went back at 10:16, not sure what the delay was about. Curtains were closed, opened up at around 10:32, and we saw Oscar Smith lying to the side. Spiritual advisor was blocking his face initially. Yellow robe, white sheet kind of up to his stomach, and I was kind of watching his stomach rise and fall. At first he was talking a lot to his spiritual advisor, and then that kind of slowed and stopped. I did get some of his last words. They asked him if he had any last words. He said, "Yes, I do." There was a little bit of a pause, and one of the two men in the black suits in the room with him said, "Proceed." And he said, from what I got, "Tell the doctor justice doesn't work. Too many innocent people are being killed. If the governor ain't got balls to do what's right, quit being governor and walk away. Our justice system is broke. Working man doesn't have that knowledge, something. We need a governor to know what his duties are, something, get a backbone." His very last words were something in the future. Again, there were two men with black suits in the room with him, lots of praying. I kind of noticed his face turning a little purplish red at about 10:40-ish. And then at around 10:40, someone wearing a blue glove kind of pops through a little socket in the wall and puts a rock down, like everyone else has mentioned. I did hear the spiritual advisor pray for the two boys, naming them at one point. And then 10:43, one man whispers to the other, the black suited man, and then 10:47 is time of death. So that's what I got.
Hi, I'm Katherine Sweeney. I'm with WPLN Nashville Public Radio. I'm last. I don't want to retread a ton. I did want to describe the room a little bit. Oscar Franklin Smith's body was perpendicular to us, which is why people were saying we couldn't see him past a spiritual advisor. She was standing between Smith and the viewing room, and he was this way. She was in front of his face. It was difficult even after she moved to truly see his face. We were only seeing it in profile. Still, I did note at 10:42, it appears that he's gone red. I wasn't sure how much of a change that was. It wasn't incredibly pronounced, but it was enough for me to write some notes down. That's about the time that I started saying that I didn't see his chest moving anymore. I also wanted to mention, like the others did, he did say, "I didn't kill her." I wasn't sure that that's what he said because it was very difficult to make out what he was saying throughout his final words, but that was in a conversation afterward. There were two men in suits in the room, and they whispered to each other a few times. They were who were responsible for raising and dropping the curtain. I think that's all I have to add. Thank you.
And so this concludes our news conference. You will have 1 hour at the conclusion of this news conference before you need to leave the premises. You will be able to do interviews and ask questions here in the tent area, but this is the end of the official news conference. So we would ask that you be prepared to leave the property at 12:30. Thank you.
I'm Amy Harwell, Assistant Federal Public Defender, Oscar's attorney. And I just wanted to say Oscar Smith was a beloved child of God. He'll be remembered for his cantankerous, curmudgeonly brand of kindness and his skill with leather work. He was a hard worker who took pride in his work both in the free world and on death row. His legal team were honored to be his lawyers. Because an autopsy would violate Oscar's deeply held religious beliefs, we will never know for sure whether he experienced the pulmonary edema that while Tennessee took his life. We do know, however, from dozens of autopsies that have been performed on those executed using those lethal injection chemicals, that this method causes excruciating pain and suffering. Our state should stop poisoning people to death in this cruel manner. Thank you.
all we saw pretty much was a line coming out of the wall, because we had like a straight view of a wall. You could see a tiny sliver of a window, and we think that that is the executioner's room. So we saw a line coming out. We saw that he did have the IVs already in him when the window came up, or the curtain came up. And other than that, other than the rock that came out of the wall at one point, we didn't know when they were pushing the drugs, nothing like that.
Yeah, there was no indication whatsoever of when the drugs were beginning, or there was no indication whatsoever of when the drugs were beginning, or when the saline had begun. They didn't give us a heads up on kind of what their symbol system was. There were two people in the room who were mic'd and were having contact with people outside the room, but that was what we saw.
Anything else, Tim?
Katherine Sweeney, WPLN. I didn't put this in my initial statement. I'm not sure what his voice sounds like usually, but to me it sounded like a raspy voice. I don't know if that's an affectation he has outside of the execution room, but that's what it sounded like to me during his final statements and the conversations we overheard. They were in his right arm. Here, it appeared to me that there were 3 pieces of tape over the IV lines and a bandage. There was also a leather restraint that seemed to have a white lining to it, and then, as everybody else has mentioned, his hand was completely covered in what looked like kinesiology tape.
You guys were all in there ready to go right at 10, and then you just sat there, or you guys sat outside when the record was clear?
Go ahead.
Yeah, we were actually in a separate room until about 10:15, and then they took us to the room at 10:15.
But kind of
10:14.
jumping off that, we got inside around 8 something and we were in like initial room like in there and didn't go back into the actual, like they call it building 8. We didn't go back there until about 9:40, and so we were sitting in like a random room for quite some time, and then they were gonna bring us in, and then they were like, never mind, around exactly 10, and then
We were brought to a transition space that was a small conference room to wait to go into the execution chamber, and we thought that was going to last a minute or 2, but we were there for probably 15 minutes, and we weren't sure why there was a delay.
Yeah.
It was a
like
half hour.
Yeah. So that is a good question, because we're actually like right here, our room, and then their room, you could see a window, and it was like they were at the feet of Smith. So we were told that they're going to be in a different room, so we could not see them.
What was Smith's demeanor throughout the entire process? Was he steady, or did it change at any given time?
There were no sudden jerks, movements. Like someone else had said, it really did look like he was just fell asleep. His stomach was rising and falling slowly, and then that stopped. But it was, I don't want to say calm, but that's the only way I can really describe it. No changes, really.
Did he seem upset at any point?
No, I mean, not.
He did seem a little agitated during his statement.
Right. Yeah.
Because he was